You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, I'm Mark Steiner and you're listening to Mark of the Maker, and this is episode 40 of the show. This time we're going to do another topical sort of a thing. It's a little different. It actually has a similar name to an earlier episode we did that talked about 3 knives. This time we're going to do something called 3 knives you should know about. And we'll get to the explanation of what that means in just a minute. Let's make sure we got all of our crew here. Make sure everyone listening knows who they're listening to. We have Mr. Tom Krein. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited for this. It should be fun.
Yeah. Be some cool knives and maybe a little history thrown in the mix, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Another normal part of our panel is Mr. Michael Birch.
Here.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
True. Good point.
It's a relative term.
I hope when he shows up at a school function and says, "Oh, this is Michael Birch," he says, "Here." Instead of hello or hi guys or something.
And I still sweat it.
Still,
man, I hope I say here right.
Exactly. And we have Mr. Sean Kendrick with us.
Hell and well met, friends.
Oh, nice.
Keeping it classy on this Sunday morning.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're recording on a Sunday morning, which is kind of unusual for us. Usually we record in the evening, and this one's a little different. We're doing it on a weekend morning. I think we did this once or twice before, right?
Yeah.
So
it actually works out pretty good.
Yeah, we're going to sound like NPR this episode because it's Sunday morning.
And we're fresh.
Yeah, no, we're not going to sound like NPR, but okay. So this thing's called 3 Knives You Should Know About, which I don't know, maybe sounds a little pretentious, but what we're going to talk about are 3. Each of us are going to go through 3 knives that we think are interesting or maybe cool and obscure. Or Michael, you want to take a swing at what we're trying to do with this episode?
Let's be honest. It was an excuse to look at cool old knives and remember stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff we do is like, we have all these books. We have all the stuff we love from our past. And it's just a really good excuse to go back and look at that stuff and be like, oh yeah, such and such, and kind of rekindle some of our own loves and pass it on a little bit.
Yeah, well said, because like you, I've got a bunch of books, and looking through these, I was like, oh, I should have done this or this or this. I could have picked so many different ones, and it really did make me think of a lot of cool old knives and some of the history.
Yeah.
Well, and on the show, we talk about some of these old books, right? Like the Knives Annual books or the Gun Digest Book of Knives, that kind of stuff, the Maker books and other things. And so it's kind of interesting, like you said, Michael, an interesting excuse to sort of sit down and leaf through some things and try to find some cool pieces to talk about and maybe some cool makers as part of that. I'm going to have a couple guys that are modern guys too. So I think we'll be mixing it up a little bit.
Yeah, I've got books skewed all over my office.
Me too.
Well, man, I mean, like with all the topicals, the research is the fun part, really.
Yeah,
it is.
Yep.
And I'm always intrigued by what you guys are going to come with. So it's kind of fun for us to kind of see what each other's going to come up with, and I try to guess if I can think of what you guys are going to come up with. I don't know if you guys play that internal game.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of the fun too, is trying to pick stuff that you guys won't pick, or stuff that we haven't really talked about in depth on the podcast already. And I mean, and you don't want to pick the obvious, right? Because it's like,
yeah.
Well, no, especially for an episode like this where you want to be turning people on to maybe hopefully something they haven't heard of before, you know?
Yeah.
So that kind of precludes the obvious.
Yeah. How obscure? How deep do you go?
Right.
As deep as necessary.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think it's, like you said, the guessing what the other guys are going to do is kind of interesting. You know, sometimes with these topical episodes or like the movie knife episode or whatever, some of the episodes we talk about it in advance, just enough to know that we're not going to duplicate right? Because we want to make sure we have enough things to talk about. And we didn't do that this time, right? We didn't do that kind of cross group prep. So before we started recording, we talked about the fact that, we may come across the same maker more than once, which will be interesting. And it'll turn into some kind of fuckery, I'm sure.
Right. Well, I mean, we'll each come from it. Even if we do pick someone, which the odds are not great that we'll pick the same knife or person, we'll come from it from a different direction. So that'll be interesting also.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's highly unlikely that the knife that you might pick is exactly the same knife, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Michael, you want to be our first canary in the coal mine on this thing? Give us a knife you think people should know about.
Yeah, and this one is kind of, and actually, I almost went a maker and not just the knife. And the one I want to talk about is the Joe Kios, pocket locket folders that he did. They were such a cool type of art knife because they had these sliding pockets that would come out, and they were kind of like a showcase for engraving. And this was awesome about these things was that, not only did you have like a fantastic Joe Kios folder, but then you'd have it engraved by one of the master engravers. So you'd have kind of two masterpieces in one knife, and that sliding locket sort of mechanism would have like another engraving underneath it. So it was mechanically cool and it was artfully cool. I mean, it had a lot of stuff going for it. And, he's one of those makers that had been around for a long time, like 1969 or something he started making. And he died, unfortunately, in I think 2014 is what I read. But man, cool history of knife making. But those, I mean, if you haven't seen them already somewhere, check out some of the old school collectors and see some of the pictures of those things. They're gorgeous.
Oh, yeah, and there's some great pics online. And I remember quite a few of these knives showing up in Blade magazine. And
oh, yeah.
I mean, you talk about devil in the details, especially
so
like
much.
on the King Tut themed one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
It's just amazing, fucking amazing.
But
we talked about like at New York, you can almost always find some of these type of pieces in the collectors, or the purveyors high-end pieces for sale.
Oh yeah, and I had a purveyor hand me one when I was, first started making out, and I was like, "You're letting me hold this?" I mean, I wouldn't let me hold this.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't.
I was just amazed to even be able to get to touch it. That's how badass they are. And, that's probably a fairly obvious pick for me just in the way I've been looking at stuff lately. A lot of art stuff, a lot of kind of get back into that very cool side of knife making that intrigues me,
Yeah, definitely museum quality work.
Oh, for sure.
Well, I mean, doesn't he have a couple knives in the Smithsonian?
I don't know. If he
I'm
does.
fairly sure at least one.
Yeah,
I'm sure
wouldn't surprise me at all.
I'm sure he
And
has.
I'm thinking it might be one of the, like Goblin Face Crown Stag folders.
Are you thinking of Swartzer? Or are you thinking of the...
No. I just let me see what I can find, but I distinctly remember seeing that he made one of the Goblin style folders, and I'm fairly sure it's in the Smithsonian.
I think you're right. He did a lot of crazy stuff. He's done, buoys and a lot of the funky stuff that a lot of these makers made, through the 80s and stuff like that. And he also did the that Exposure. Remember the movie Exposure?
Yes, I do.
Did we talk about that on the knife movie episode at all?
I don't think so.
We mentioned it at one point in time because I remember us mentioning it in passing and possibly talking about how I don't know if it's currently available on DVD. I remember you used to look for VHS copies of it.
Mm-hmm. But they mentioned it, like a very rare Joe Kios or something knife in the movie. But sometimes I get confused on, did we talk about it on a podcast or did I talk about it with one of you guys? Which is sometimes kind of meshes in my mind.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So for people who aren't familiar with this, because not everybody can look stuff up while they're listening, this is definitely an art style. It looks like most of them are kind of daggery shaped, right, with symmetric handles. Seems like it's kind of part of the point of the design is that super symmetric thing. But then they have this sliding panel, right? You want to explain that, Michael?
It's basically a mechanically just I mean, that explains it. It slides out. You know, it's a small pocket. Probably quarter inch wide, maybe a little bit wider, and it slides backwards so you can see even more engraving. And he would integrate some of the, engraving from the top into the bottom layer, in this very kind of themed stuff. It was like having the greatest palette for, or not palette, the greatest like canvas for engraving and stuff. It's really just amazing stuff.
And most of the time you can't tell that it's there. It's like
no,
right. You don't know that it's there, and then you slide it open, and you're like, "Oh, that's really crazy."
Yeah, pretty trick.
Okay, I was wrong. It's Larry Fugen who has the Goblin folder in the Smithsonian. That was totally my bad.
Right. So these pocket lockets, that sliding feature, it's sort of like a little, like you said, a panel that slides down, but it's integrated into the knife so that when it's closed, there's very little indication that there even is a panel, and most often they are engraved or embellished somehow, and that stuff goes right over the interface. So it further kind of hides that whole thing. But are these...
Yeah.
Do these lock, or is that part of the lock? It seems like I saw one of these that had where that panel underneath was actually a release for an auto or something.
I'm sure it did. A lot of those were autos, and I'm sure he tricks them out to be released and do whatever.
Now, for our listeners, when you do get a chance to search, make sure you find the Barry Lee hands engraved Joe Kies auto double pocket locket.
Yeah, man.
Now, if you don't know Barry Hands engraving, just do a general search for some of the stuff he's done. It's amazing. It is nothing short of fucking extraordinary. No. The Hands one has it's gold, a gold leaf motif. It's deeply engraved. All the high spots with leaves are done in gold. Just an amazing, amazing knife.
Yeah. Is that the one that was like $80K on a site or something?
It's
not cheap.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I just pulled it up. It's got gold leaf in the blade.
Yeah, I mean, just amazing. And I mean, that's Barry Hand's work all day. I recently saw a knife he did of Steve Johnson's. It was a Big Bear that he did the same kind of gold leaf motif engraving all over, even on the... it was an integral, so even on the integral pinheads, everywhere.
Yeah, the mother of pearl is all...
Yeah, just an extraordinary, extraordinary piece.
Wow.
Yeah, just amazing. Yeah, $80K. It's on Knife Purveyor right now. It's available, guys.
Yeah, I just looked on Arizona. They have one for $5,000 or $6,000 that's just completely plain, not engraved at all. It's actually kind of an interesting one to look at because in that one you can actually see there is a separate release button and then the panel that slides, because it's all polished out. But it's very, very basic compared to the some of these super engraved pieces.
Yeah, but man, it's clean. Now, are you talking about the one that looks like it has sort of the tortoiseshell inlay in the sliding panel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a phenomenally clean looking knife. It looks classy.
Super classy, yeah.
Yeah. And his basic is our best.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, shit, I wish my best was as good as that. Jeez.
Well, I mean, honestly, if you're like a collector, that would be a good one to get and send to someone to have engraved. I mean, it's basically a canvas.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that'd be a big engraver challenge because there's some big names that did knives by him or knives for him, and I don't know, that's stepping into rarefied air right there.
Yeah, you better trust. I'd rather send a Rolex to than one of those, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just saying, as the engraver side, it's like, oh shit, I'm playing with the big dogs if I'm going to engrave one of these things, right? You're inevitably going to get compared to some of the biggest names.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's cool stuff in there. There's inlaid, there's versions that are sculpted, there's all kinds of craziness. And by many different engravers in lots of different styles, which are really, really cool.
Yes, very.
Mm-hmm. And once you go down that rabbit hole, you'll start seeing other similar, that dagger type of art knife was very popular for a very long time. And you'll see some Osbornes, you'll see some Overlanders, I never can pronounce his name right. A lot of those guys that did this very ornate type of autos and manual dagger stuff. It's a fun rabbit hole.
I'm looking at a Warren Osborne kind of in that motif right now, and damn! I mean, it's got like puzzle piece bolster, rear and back, pearl in the center, escutcheon plate, gorgeous Damascus. It looks like either a bronze or maybe rose gold bell on it. Damn, what a knife!
Yeah, those guys, man.
The one that were you talking about? The one that's on Donato's website, Knife Purveyor. There's a crazy looking one on. No, I'm not. That's not the one I'm asking you about, Sean. I'm thinking earlier when Michael was talking about something. There's a really nutty one on Knife Purveyor that's got crazy colors and I guess it's enamel that he did the engraver guy did the color in, but it's pretty stunning. Where it's like a garden scene where there's flowers and hummingbirds, very colorful hummingbirds and stuff. And then when the panel slides open, it's like you're spreading the brush back and finding some flowers behind the brush, right? When you slide the panel down and remove that or
who did that? It sounds like Tim Herman's stuff.
Giovanni Steduto.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Now, Tim Herman's another one, too. That's another rabbit hole to go down if you haven't already.
Yeah.
And, man, now I'm looking at a picture here of a pocket locket. Man, it's done in a Peter Pan motif. Disney's Peter Pan.
Really?
I shit you not.
Well, that's pretty cool.
It's got Captain Hook and the tick-tocking croc on one side, and then Peter Pan, John, and Wendy, and the baby on the other. On the Captain Hook side, in the slide-down area, there's a clock. And then you flip it over in the slide-down area with Peter on that side. It has the Lost Boys in the hidden part.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then Tinkerbell is gold engraved and inlaid onto the blade, both sides.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, holy hell.
If you talk to an engraver, just ask them about some of the stuff they've been requested to do. Talking to Jody Moeller about some of the things he's done and been asked to do is amazingly crazy. There's some funky themes, and he's got a bunch of books and stuff like that. He kind of really instilled the love of books, in me. And one night he got down the book of engravings and great guns, type of thing. These very high-end Holland stuff like that. And there is a lot of kinky sex getting engraved on those guns back in the day.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is pretty wild.
Yeah, it looks fairly normal to me, but whatever.
Seemed pretty pedestrian to me, but what not?
Man, that's a good one.
Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
I mean, great one, man.
That will give our listeners a lot to think about and look into.
Oh, I've got hours of looking to do now.
Yeah, Birch came out swinging.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not didn't have any price restraints on this.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily 3 knives you should know about and then run out and buy, although there are a couple in here that are probably worth looking at, but $22,000 or whatever is not easy money for most.
It's all relative.
Right.
But, we talk about the MoMA a lot, right? So if you go in there, you can buy a blank canvas that's painted white for $60,000, or you could buy one of these.
Mm-hmm.
No brainer.
Small collection of these.
Well, we've talked about before. I know, like Mark and I have talked about before about the aspect of collecting, of selling a bunch to buy one great. Not that the knives you don't have are great or something, but like doing with watches and stuff. Do you sell a bunch of high end, or good watches to get that one great watch? And you can do the same with these types of folders if you want. Sell a bunch of your good folders and go for that great one.
Tom wouldn't even really have to put a dent in the mountain to score.
No, not really.
Well, you know.
Crack open one couch and he's got
Exactly.
a Kio's money.
Yeah. That might be the unit of measure of wealth in the Mark of the Maker world is how many couches worth.
I moved a couch out of the garage, the one that I found the guns in and stuff. Moved it into my son Zach's room, and I checked the bottom before we moved it. Didn't find anything else. I was kind of disappointed, honestly.
Just in case it was like the rainbow thing and it somehow refreshed and there was more.
Well, you never know.
You should start a new tradition. You have to add a gun to it when it passes hands.
Yeah,
right.
There you go. Yeah, or that could be a side gig, Tom. You could develop some furniture line, kind of like those kick-ass bookcases and entertainment centers that have all those nutty hidden compartments for firearms and stuff.
Dude.
Build it right in the base of the couch.
My mom's building a new house, and I was looking at her cabinets, and in the kitchen they've got this island, and it's 4 feet wide, and it's got 3 feet of cabinets. And there's like a foot empty space. I'm like, you need to put some secret compartments in.
Oh,
here.
yeah.
She thought I was crazy.
Heck yeah.
Do we ever grow out? Is that a guy thing? Is it a human race thing that we want to have secret compartments?
I think you had to grow up watching Scooby-Doo or something, man.
Yeah, or James
Maybe.
Bond.
I don't know.
I don't know, but I would love to have a house. I think that would be an awesome selling feature. Be like, hey, this is the house. It's an awesome house, but there's 15 secret compartments. If you buy the house, I'll tell you where they are.
Yeah. Secret room with a secret access. Yeah, I'm in. 100%.
All day long, right?
Yeah, I think if you're doing new construction, it wouldn't be that hard.
No.
To be able to do some stuff like that. Even
I mean, you have to kill the contractors, but
No, you bring in multiple contractors. Each of them works on a very specific section, and they're not told what.
No, see, Sean's got it planned out. He's got the villain's lair thing like all sussed out. He's got a plan.
Well, dude, I mean, that's standard villain protocol when you're building a hideout.
Exactly. Hello.
You got to have multiple contractors, and then, if you really want to be a villain, you stiff all of them on the pavements.
That's pretty much what H.H. Holmes did. He got rid of the people that built his little hell house.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
Sorry, I brought a little weirdness into this.
Yeah.
Don't Google that.
Or there's going to be a movie coming out on him sometime soon. They did a movie version of Devil in the White City.
So you're saying I shouldn't have Googled that?
Yeah, but it's pretty intriguing. You get a good... It's interesting.
I don't know who this cat is.
Yeah. We'll save that for some other podcast.
All right.
Cool. Yeah,
all right. Tom, you want to take a shot at, I don't know, that's pretty hard to follow up.
Yeah, I mean...
Damn right.
Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from Michael, so... Or really,
you mean
any of you guys.
Excellence.
Right. Yes. So I went a little different direction on my first pick. I went with the Webster Marbles Woodcraft. I really think that Webster Marbles did something pretty neat with his company, and I think the Woodcraft was kind of the birth of the modern sporting knife in America. I think this influenced Skagel, and Skagel we've seen influence many other people, and I don't know, it's just kind of a cool story, and it's one that I even have some, like the Webster Marbles book with all the catalogs, and there's not a whole lot of information on where this cat came from or what he did or any of that stuff before he started the company.
Now you're talking about the Marbles knife company, right?
Yeah. Gladstone, Michigan.
Okay.
So this would be in Mark's backyard up in the UP.
Yeah, man. We're a hotbed of knife shit. For real.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of history there. And I don't know if you guys familiar with the Woodcraft?
Yep. I just pulled up a picture of it.
So it's like the upswept, and it upswept about a 4.25 inch blade or so. It's got like the swedge, and it's just kind of a modern interpretation of like the Buffalo River skinning type knife. Very popular back in the early 1900s. Copied by pretty much every big player in the industry, from Remington to Western. Pretty much everybody had a version of this knife. Most of them were like, they were hidden tang. It was stacked leather handle. Just a really cool outdoorsman's knife. And, Webster Marbles was kind of cool. He basically, in the 1890s, it says the earliest I could find, he moved into that area, and he was an outdoorsman, and he was, one of his kind of canny things was he could look at an acre of property and tell you how many board feet you get out of it. Like if you logged it.
Timbered it.
Yeah. But, his company started out in 1892. He, made the Webster Marbles rifle sight, and that was kind of the start. And, in 1902, he had the Deweese, which was a full tang knife, and a pretty neat little knife. And around 1915, he improved it, and that's where he came up with the Woodcraft. And it was in production from 1915 until 1970.
Huh. Yeah, Marbles has always just been around. It's like the company that's been around. They ran all the my little collecting books as a kid.
Yep.
But I didn't know that much about the history of it.
There's surprisingly not a lot that I could find out there. I mean, I searched in multiple different books, and there'd be mention of them, but not a lot of like the background stuff. Pretty neat. They made like the match safes. They made a compass that would pin on your shirt or a coat. Lots of different knives, lots of cool knives. One of my favorite knives of all time is the little ring Burden Trout that would go on your little finger.
Oh, yeah.
They did a safety hatchet too, didn't they?
Yeah, they actually
That's what I was
started
about to say.
They did the safety hatchet before they did the knives. It went from the sights to the safety axe. And interesting thing, when at some point in time Randall, if you've seen any of the Randall axes, they bought a bunch of the axe heads from Marbles when at some point they had several cases shipped to Orlando, and that's what they made the Randall axes with the all metal haft out of. They were Marbles.
Huh.
So
what was funny, I always thought that was such a badass type of little hatchet, and I would, I need to put a post or put a picture up, because I got this book back not too long ago of my little 1995 collector's guide or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I'd go to flea markets a lot, like I talked about, and and find little slip joints and stuff like that. And I always dreamed of finding one of those safety hatchets, like one of those was just going to appear. It never happened, but I always thought that'd be so cool.
I've got a couple. So A.G. Russell bought the rights or whatever for that. And I've got a couple of the ones that AG made, and I'll be honest, they kind of suck.
Well, I'm not really going to do anything with it. I just want it.
Yeah, I know.
I just thought it was neat.
For sure, they were cool, and I think they sold a jillion of the things. And basically, if you guys don't know what it is, there's a little thing that folds down into the handle, and when you're not using it, you fold it up, and it covers the bit, the sharp part of the bit on the axe. But in use, it actually makes some pretty rough hot spots in the head. On the A.G. Russell ones, at least, it wasn't really good geometry, so they didn't cut good. But pretty neat piece of history. I've got, I think, 2 of them somewhere around here.
Of course you do.
Well, But yeah, the Woodcraft from Webster, I think it was literally the birth of the modern sporting knife, and had a lot of influence over knives in general in the U.S. Our knives are different from our heritage from Europe and anywhere else in the world, Norway, all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it's got a cool blade. It's got tons of belly. It's almost like a Skinner sort of shape, like with a, you know what I mean? But with a nice swedge up top, and that pommel, the shaped pommel, is real cool.
Yeah, this was, the Boy Scouts of America, they adopted this knife. It was, if you look at any of the old Scout books, they almost always have these in them. really handy knife. I actually want to kind of do some hidden tang knives like this. I've designed a few. The original knives for me have a little bit of a small handle. It seems like a lot of the knives from that period, the handle is just about a ½ inch too short for what I personally like. But obviously they did the job.
Well, and yeah, people were a lot smaller 100 years ago or more, right?
Well,
physically
yeah.
smaller.
It's not like I'm a big guy, but yeah.
No, I know, but like I went to the Dayton Air Force Museum and they had these pilot suits from like World War I era. And
it's crazy.
Yeah, like biplanes and stuff. And I'm like, my son was with me. I'm like, dude, you wouldn't even fit in that. I certainly wouldn't. I know he wouldn't.
Somewhere I saw like George Washington's boots and I was like, oh my gosh.
Right.
I mean, they were like a size 5 or something crazy. It was tiny.
And wasn't he a tall dude for the era?
I think so, man.
Yeah. Weird.
Crazy how nutrition plays into,
Tom's
kind of thing.
Tom's got air quotes around nutrition.
Did anyone else think their school sucked because they had like a half-painted portrait of George Washington?
No.
No?
Yeah. I mean, my school sucked for a whole lot of different reasons, but not that one.
We didn't have that, but yeah.
Well, we had that painting. Well, not the painting, but like a print of it, and I'd just be like, why do we have this shitty-ass, unfinished print? I thought we just had it, but, it's kind of a shitty school to begin with, so never mind.
Yeah, Gladstone, Michigan is... If you lived in Gladstone, I'll go out there and say even in the last 20 years, there's hardy people that live in Gladstone, Michigan, right? It's cold there. It's in the Upper Peninsula, kind of way around the corner. So more than 100 years ago, 120 years ago plus, that it was not an improved area, right?
So, backside of beyond.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so being there as someone who's an outdoorsman or a sportsman or whatever makes complete sense because there ain't anything else there even today. So, and it is way up there. So interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's where Matt Martin lives.
Right.
All right. That's my first.
Nice pick, Tom.
Thanks.
Yeah, very much.
All right, Sean, you want to throw one out there for knife people you think people should know about?
Yeah, my first pick would be knife maker Jean-Marc Laroche. He's an art knife guy. To be honest with you, I don't think he's making at this point, but his sculpture on the knives he made was fantastic. A lot of kind of dark motifs. One of my favorite is a large kind of Persian-shaped blade that the handle is a hand you basically shake hands with to hold it.
Sean, how do you spell his name?
JeanMarcLaroche.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the work offhand. I'll have to Google it and take a look.
Man, he got a lot of coverage in Blade magazine about 96 or 97, and that's where I first saw his work. The first stuff I saw, it was a set of 3 or 4 knives. They were kind of spaceship shaped. And like the cockpit area was a skull and the wings were black resin with 2 little blades coming out of the wing and then a dagger blade coming out of the center of the hand. Well, can't even hardly call it a handle because it's a fucking spaceship, but just very outside the box and extraordinarily well done sculpture. And the sculpture's a mix of steel, silver, and resin.
Yeah, I see that knife, the hand that you're talking about. That is awesome.
Man, it's an interesting piece.
Heck yeah.
And he did quite a bit of stuff that was inspired by insects and bugs and stuff. Like I'm looking at one right now that's a spider, but the body of the spider is a skull, and then the legs are partly resin and partly hooked steel blades.
Way cool.
Yeah, I mean, just totally outside the box stuff, really creative thinking, and wonderfully, wonderfully executed sculpture. And his blades look nice, too.
Yeah. Super, super art stuff, right? Fantasy kind of.
Yes, very much so.
Wow.
That's some crazy stuff.
Google machine is burning up right now.
Yeah.
Bad for the folks that are out driving. They're like, I want to know what it is. we're just over here Googling on the podcast.
So lots of skeleton art. Is that the same guy? Or is that a different person by the same name? like skeleton sculpture kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that's definitely him. If you get on his site,
I sent a link to the site.
Okay. There's a group of skeleton sculpted knives. It looks like they have, I don't know, almost a lagweol blade.
Wow.
And then a skeleton handle that looks maybe bronze.
Dude, that one that's like a flying, I don't know what it is, pterodactyl with a human skull and blades coming all over it. What the heck, dude? That is crazy. That good pick, man. That's some crazy stuff.
That's down the whole lot obscure that I wanted to see.
Wow.
It's obscure. And I mean, the dude's stuff is striking. It's stuck with me all these years.
Yeah.
Has this stuff
like, are you guys looking at the little scorpion piece? Did you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 small blades on that motherfucker.
What about the one that's like, I don't know what it is, like some kind of reptile with wings and like an actual bird claw foot thing for the guard?
Perch it. Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's some crazy talent. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a flying chupacabra.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? Whose work? Virgil England.
Oh, yeah, I can see
a little bit.
Some of the sculptural details and whatnot. Definitely see that.
Yeah, like the pterodactyl that folds, like the folding. You know what? Do you know which piece I'm talking about? It's like a folder, and it's a pterodactyl.
Yeah,
definitely reminds me personally of Virgil England's esque work, right?
Yeah, that one really does. It's got the skull. It's a skull of a hummingbird. It looks like, or something.
It says it's a pterodactyl.
Oh, I didn't read the description. But yeah, very flowing. That's a very cool knife right there. I like the aesthetics of it. You know, some of these things you like because of the artwork, you like because of what it represents, or just the time and detail. But that's like aesthetically pleasing. Good lines on it all together with the artwork.
You guys checked out the sword cane?
It's pretty sick. Like the
vertebrae. No doubt, man. It's stacked up vertebrae. And then the way when it gets to the neck, it curves a little bit to make it a functional cane.
Right.
Which is just like human anatomy too. I mean, it's like,
yeah, that's pretty wild.
If we're going to summon some things from below, these are the knives we want to use.
I think it's really interesting, the fact that there's a bunch of anatomy involved, right?
Yes.
Whether animal or dinosaur or human or whatever, and sometimes a mix, maybe most times a mix of all of those. That's awfully cool.
What's interesting is you kind of see some of the, you know, I get confused on which way to say it. I've heard Giger and Geiger, and I heard Giger was the proper way to say it, but I've always said Geiger for years.
Yeah, same.
But you see some kind of influenced pieces from some of the modern import companies nowadays. I think is more of maybe a machining practice to be like, this is what we can do, kind of check it out. Or maybe just having fun with some art. But it's interesting that we're seeing a little bit of that nowadays, that biometric, and I don't know. It's fun to see.
I think that Cobra knife is pretty badass too.
Yeah, no shit, right? I mean, just curves all over.
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome lines.
Do you know if a lot of that is casting? I assume probably, or
man, I'm guessing it's at least rough cast and then finished. Yeah. Like I said, he did work in a lot of resins.
Huh. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because, I mean, it's obvious that on most of these he does his own blades, but there's a couple blades on here that are Spyderco's.
Yeah.
I saw that.
Right.
That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, at some level, I mean, kind of makes sense a little bit, right? For at least some of these projects, maybe why if there's something that's going to work or fits or maybe even inspired the work, right? The one that I'm seeing, the bird Spyderco one, it's got that kind of shape, right? Where it's like an eye and a beak, and I don't know, it's kind of cool.
Hey, Tom?
What?
You going to buy the The lady dick?
What the fuck? That's art, man.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Well, I think it's cool, man. I dig that.
I think I'm just going to stick with the knives.
And the hourglasses are bitching.
The tattoo gun stuff, that's pretty cool. I can see that being, I don't know. It's very cool. Oh, Necronomicon. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, it made, basically, for those of you guys that like Evil Dead stuff, made a very cool, looks like in 1995 he made this, sculpture of the Necronomicon, except a lot cooler and less cheesy.
Which highly recommend you guys check out every aspect of his website when you find it. The human mechanics sculpturals are phenomenal also.
They really are. Cool. We'll definitely have to put a link up to this guy's site. This stuff is a trip. Like you said, those hourglasses are really, 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 really cool.
Oh, dude, that one with the like double bubbler on it. I've never seen a hourglass like that. That's neat.
Yeah, that is cool. You got to wonder if it's designed like one of them is an hour and the second one's another hour, or some increment of time or something like that.
Yeah, you would think there would be some kind of rationale to it.
Yeah. Well, very, very cool. Yeah, I'd never seen his work before, Sean. That's a cool one. I like that.
When I saw the Spydercos, I've seen those before. I've come across that before and been like, what in the hell? But I've never seen his full work before.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
That is
good call, Sean.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So my first one, I'm going to talk about D.E. Henry.
Cool.
D.E. Henry, very famous and influential knife maker. And I was looking through, what am I looking at? The Knives 84, 4th edition of the Knives annual book. And I think he was mostly kind of known as a Bowie guy.
Uh-huh.
And but he has a Skinner, a humpback Skinner in Stag that I think is just fantastic. And there's a sheath or scabbard that's, nickel, silver, and leather. Absolutely beautiful. It's in black and white, so I'll take a picture and post it. Very cool work, and a really, really nice article for anybody that has this 4th annual edition Knives 84. This one came to me, I think, courtesy of Bobby Branton, I believe. And but the really nice article in here, lengthy article about D.E. Henry and his work and his influence on other makers like Randall and others, and kind of influence on the industry. And it's very, very cool.
Interesting enough, I've got a sticky note, because I sticky note all my, once we started doing the podcast, the Knives Annual, and I've got a D.E. Henry sticky note on that book.
Yeah.
What I think was really cool about him, because he is, we're going to have to do a full episode, or at least a half episode on him one of these days. Mm-hmm. This whole idea that he started making the buoys, and then he hit a point where he thought his buoys were so much better that he changed. It basically said, my old buoys are shit. This is the new standard.
Right,
and
right.
Very meticulous, very clean, almost the standard for buoys for a long time. Amazing, amazing work.
Yeah. Yeah, and another guy that started out made his first knife on a Navy ship. Same kind of like the Loveless story kind of thing. So very similar in some ways. Definitely known as a very interesting character. Loved and hated at the same time by people, by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Like you said, we'll have to dig into that a little bit more, but if people go out and do some searching, even if you don't have this book, there's lots of D.E. Henry stuff out there. Definitely worth checking out, because it's kind of an important maker in the landscape and part of the timeline for sure.
Some of the cleanest Bowie knives ever made. I mean, seriously, iconic for that. And it's interesting. I've talked to people that knew him, and he was kind of an asshole. I mean, it was from all accounts. And it was interesting because a lot of these guys were they felt that he did that on purpose as kind of a marketing type thing. It was back in the day, some of these guys were, that was how they were known as,
Man, it's an easy persona to put forth. People will remember it too. I mean, hell, there's worse marketing schemes.
But there's also that aspect of someone that goes that deep into their craft is sometimes a personality that doesn't translate.
A people person.
Yeah, sometimes the two don't go hand in hand. And sometimes that translates into being an asshole. Sometimes it's just they're focused and that's all they look at.
I've never actually handled a D.E. Henry knife. Have you guys?
No, seen them in a case and wanted to. Just because of, it's, good choice, man. That's a super clean. They're just gorgeous.
I love the fact, Mark, that you went with an old school fixed blade maker. Like you went back in time.
Mm-hmm.
That was not an expected pick for you from me.
No.
Yeah, I wrote that one down as a possibility, but it's also a page of like 20 names.
Yeah, right.
It's for real.
Well, that's the thing, right? And I think that's one of the things that is fun about this kind of show is even just in round one, we have, right, Art Knife with Famous Engraver, super fantasy stuff from Sean, super user, like core sportsman knife design thing from Tom. And then the D.E. Henry stuff is sort of like a cornerstone, I think is safe to say, in the knife timeline. And that's pretty damn broad scope. And when you think about the fact that the history of the industry contains all of those, right? And to Michael's point, even just a teeny tiny microscopic scratch in the surface of this whole thing, I think that's awesome. Hopefully when we talk about some of this stuff, it helps people understand just how big it is, right?
Well, I think these first picks were very telling of the personalities of us. You've gotten into the fixed blades, you've gotten into the big bears, which has led you down more of an old school Bowie type of path. Tom has always been very old school, AG Connections, the old production type stuff. Sean loves the funky art, the obscure. It's very telling. They're not surprising, but yet they are at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I
get you, man.
I loved hearing them, and we probably should have put like in the disclaimer at the beginning. Listen to this in front of your computer.
Well, I think this is something you could listen to, find enjoyment, and then go back and listen to or look at our notes on the episode or something like that.
Do not try to write these down as you drive in or the names.
Right. And Andrew Riley came out of retirement recently because we had an episode that was very, he took a little hiatus, I think, and then he came back with a recent set of his show notes, and he does a fantastic job with that. So we've shouted him out many times before, but high five Andrew for doing that. This would be a great one to have some resources available. And we're going to do the same. We have pictures, I think, that we can share and get out there as the episode starts to publish. But yeah, rabbit hole stuff, right? This is a rabbit hole episode for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what people think of, because I always wonder, when should I put a photo out, because I don't want to spoil it and I want to give people enough time to listen, It's always kind of like, when do I toss that out there on the Facebook group?
Yeah. I think maybe right before this episode comes out, we'll put together one of those little 4-picture collage things, and we'll each pick one of the knives that we talked about and float it out there, because people are going to ask, what the fuck is this episode about? Because they're going to be all over the map, right? Which is cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. That was a cool first round, and we got a ways to go. So let's keep moving. So Michael, what's your second pick?
Okay. I think I only went up in cost on this one, and I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name. A German maker named Jürgen Stenau.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of guys, who this is.
Yes.
Steinau. But I think for collectors and makers, you should know and kind of look at what his work is. And some of the stuff is not always aesthetically pleasing to me, to my eye, but I appreciate the shit out of how much work goes into that. This is like almost an art knife maker's maker type of guy. He's been doing it for quite some time, at least the 80s. But it's almost like a practice in cubism in metal. Sharp edges, as far as not pertaining to the edge, is very hard to do in metal. And he achieves these very faceted pieces that have these inlays and just gorgeous lines all over a lot of these pieces. And it's tough to do, but he does them well. And they've been highly appreciated by the art collectors for a while. And if you haven't seen them, you've got to check them out.
Man, I think he's currently influencing quite a few of the art knives we see with a lot of the way the mosaics and inlays they're using right now.
Very much. I think you're correct on that, because he did a lot of that mosaic kind of mother of pearl stuff, and which is funky because I'm kind of working on a mosaic right now. Nothing even close to whatever, but it just, you have to appreciate the art in it. And as a maker, look at it and think, you don't have to go with the stream to be popular. You know, if you want to go out on a limb and try something different, try it. You know, find that voice that's your own, and he obviously did, and it's done well for him. Of course, you got to have a shitload of skill to back it up too, but it's a good thing to look at and appreciate as a maker too.
Yeah, good call. I didn't actually know his name, but I know his work.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought he was Russian, but he's German for sure. I looked it up. Super cool, creative stuff, and I love what you just said. You know, make what you want. I recently just had this conversation with a new maker, and he's like, people are telling me I got to do this and this, and I'm like, make what you like and do it well, and then go from there. You know, don't do anything that somebody says you have to do. That just,
well, we get stuck in trends, and we sometimes I'll look across Instagram and there's a ton of knives that look the exact same out there.
Yeah.
And they sell all right and whatever, but it's not, you're not standing out, you know, by making what everyone else is making. And that resonates with me a lot, because I feel very boxed in sometimes with where I've gotten now, and I keep wanting to get outside of that box, and it's tough.
Yeah, I love his use of colors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a knife here that 50/50 Productions put up the picture of, and it's a lever release auto by him, and it is stunning. If you could find out if Steve still has that piece, I would like to see it next time I'm around Missouri.
He may have. You never know. He collected a bunch of his stuff there for a while. I was reading about it was Joe Kurtzman, I think, or one of the guys from Blade was talking about how it was bids at an AKI show, and Steve Delac came in and won the bid last minute or whatever.
Right.
And took the victory from him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard this name a few times over the years, but Steve is the guy that I've most frequently heard it from, for sure. So yeah, I think Steve might join us at some point here for an episode. It'd be really interesting to ask him about Juergen's work and kind of his perspective on it. It's really interesting because, to your point, Tom, he does a lot of, I'm going to call it deco type stuff, because that's what those little window panes remind me of, a little Mondrian kind of thing almost. He does a lot of that and some very angular stuff that, for people familiar with Gus Cicchini's work, this will be very reminiscent, or very, you know what I mean? Maybe Gus was influenced by him. I don't know. Or this type of knife. I could see that. But very angular in some cases. But then he's got a bunch of pieces that are not that way.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting. It's sort of, like you said, Tom, make what you want to make. It would be really cool to know more about that, and whether those are time frame things for Juergen Steinau, or if they are, you know, eras, or if it's, I got bored, so I built something completely different to keep it fresh, or, you know what I mean? Like, did he mix it up over time, or were these all, separated in certain periods of his career? That would be really cool to know.
Well, you can see, like, I think Knife Purveyor had one that I was looking at that had it was like a late 80s, and you can see the progression. You know, it was a very kind of normal blade, but he had inlaid mother of pearl, not quite as tight. And once again, you know, those absolute sharp corners as inlays and stuff like that, man, that's impressive. And as but you could see the progression of where that was going to go. Some of those more rounded pieces, you know, with the, you know, maybe just something he wanted to step away from what he's used to keep it going. Who knows? He'd be interesting man to talk with.
For sure.
You know, Michael and Mark, for those of you that don't know, when the New York Custom Knife Show happened this last time, we went to the arms exhibit at which museum was that? The
Met.
The Met, yeah.
Metropolitan Museum of Art, yep, in New York City.
Yep. Some of his knives, they have the real angular and like the squared off blade. It reminded me of some of the hunting knives that were in that exhibit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Just really cool stuff, man. Very Art Deco and futuristic at the same time.
Yeah.
But what also made me laugh, I think it was last year or something, I saw on Instagram, it was his open bid thing was a ripped out sheet of paper. And I was like, yes, he is human like the rest of us.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying his bid sheet for his open bid knife. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like a ripped out notebook, notepad paper.
Did he exhibit at Steve's March New York show in the past?
I don't know. I really don't.
I bet he did.
I'm sure, he's done something there, but yeah.
It seems like it. I've heard Steve mention his name many times, and it makes me think that maybe it was as part of a show, or maybe it was part of another kind of conversation about knives. I don't remember, but there's some really, really cool stuff out there. Some awesome looking fixed blades, folders, lever release autos, you name it. There's some very, very cool stuff. There's one that kind of caught my eye is actually something. It looks like he did the inlays for Dietmar Kressler Drop Point Hunter. That is super badass.
They did a little collab. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Oh, now talk about a piece to own.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
See? Call this the rabbit hole.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
It's kind
That's a really, really cool piece too, because it's got like a bail on it.
Yeah, right. So it's got an interesting combo of stuff, right? Like, okay, if that knife had different handles, like, I don't know, Stag or something.
Shit.
Okay, Dietmar Kressler. Yeah, that looked like an awesome Dietmar Kressler knife. And then with those stacked inlay stuff, like you mentioned, Tom, with really nice color, and what a cool piece that is.
Well, they've done more than one, because I see a drop point and a semi-skinner both.
Oh,
Same
yeah.
build, bail, all that.
Awesome.
And the handle inlay on that reminds me of White Noise, but in a good way.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's staticky.
It is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, visually static.
But I dig it, man. I dig it a whole lot. It's the little odd flecks of color here and there. It's just a spectacular piece.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, the 0% chance that Jürgen Steino listens to the show, but he might be like, oh, come on. I do way cooler stuff than that. But I really like what I'm going to call the contrast, right? The contrast that somehow works, right? Of that very artistic, colorful Jürgen Steino stuff in a Kressler that is sort of like, typically maybe I'm going to get this wrong, but I think of Dietmar Kressler's work as sort of like angular Loveless style for the most part. Very much. Right? So
yeah.
Almost like modern style Loveless. Or
Are you guys looking at the drop point or the semi-skinner?
We're looking at the drop point that's on.
I'm looking at the drop.
The semi-skinner's cool because the mother of pearl inlay is actually even different from that. It's a different pattern. It's cool in a different way, but yeah.
Yeah, he's using all that as his canvas, and it's amazing. The colors and the combinations. And it's I recommend the listeners get in there and start checking this stuff out. And we're talking about Knife Purveyor a lot, because they have a lot of cool old stuff, man. Yes. A lot of intriguing stuff. Donato's an interesting character. Got some cool knives.
Cool stuff. Wow.
There's a really awesome, super, super, super thin fixed blade knife. I don't see a release on it, and I saw a couple other fixed blades that he did that had very, very long, super slim blades. But yeah, when you think about how thin or tiny or delicate some of these pieces are, mm-hmm. and the amount of detail that's contained inside them, in spite of that, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, very much.
And some of them have very angular fullers where the fuller isn't a plunge with a ball end. I don't know how he's doing some of these things, but there's some cool shit going on.
That's the part that amazes me, those funky angular fullers.
Yeah.
It's got to be done with a a carving tool, or I don't, or it could be set up on a different plate. Yeah, I don't know. It's amazing.
Well, yeah. You could probably rough most of them in on the mill, but the back part is all got to be done by hand. I mean,
yeah, It might be like a shaped grinding wheel. Who knows, right? But there's something cool going on there for sure.
When I look at that, I'm like, I don't know how. That's where I get very appreciative, because I've got quite a few tricks in my bag, and I have no clue.
Good call, man. Good choice.
Thanks.
Yeah, excellent.
I just sent you guys the picture that I was talking about that has, at first I thought this was a fixed blade, but I guess it's a folder. Yeah, because I can see the slot in the handle back at the back.
No, I've seen that.
That's the exact same picture I was looking at, Mark, which is ironic.
Okay. Yeah. But look at all the pieces that are in that super slim handle. I mean, these aren't like ginormous knives. That knife is really long, but if you compare it to those lever release switchblades, that the width of that handle is what? Half an inch, maybe?
Yeah.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of inlays and facets, and what a cool piece.
And I'm pretty sure he has stuff in some international museums. I'm not sure where, but I thought I came across there being his stuff in museums, which it absolutely belongs in any sort of art museum.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jürgen Steinau, great pick, Michael. He might be a name that comes up again somewhere in the Mark of the Maker timeline. He'll probably come up again with Steve Delac if Steve takes the opportunity to join us, or I don't know, we might have to figure out a way to have more conversation about him.
I'm definitely going to ask him about it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, Tom, how about you? What's your second pick for a knife people should know about?
It seems like World War II was like this pivotal era in custom knife making. If you look back, you get Randall, Buck, quite a few others. And the one I'm going to go with is kind of a cool story. I'm going with the John Eck Model 1.
Nice.
Good choice.
And John Eck, I mean, it's pretty neat. So if you also look at this time period, our troops didn't have enough combat knives. There was actually like ads in newspapers and magazines asking for Americans to send in their old hunting knives and stuff like this for our troops. And so that's where a lot of these knife makers, they like fired up and started, trying to support our troops, which I think is pretty awesome. If you think about it, you've got the U.S. has a need, and all these little mom and pop like cottage industry, they just kind of fired up and went to work. And what's interesting is John Eck, who was a machinist in Hamden, Connecticut, basically he wanted to go and serve in World War II, and Uncle Sam said, sorry, we're not going to take you. I guess he had crushed his hand and had a hand injury. And so in order to support the war effort, he started making this Model 1 commando knife. He actually petitioned the British military to use the word commando for his knife, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
And it's if you've ever seen one, the old Eck knives are pretty rough. I mean, they're not a beautiful highly finished knife, but these are basically a 1/8 inch stock, high carbon blade, and if you look at them, they have a very abrupt grind. They only go about 1/4 of an inch up, and they were not designed to cut really well. They were designed to be tough and to stick in someone.
Huh. Spell his last name, Tom.
E.K.
Oh, just E.K. Okay.
Yep, John Eck. Basically, they had a maple hardwood handle, very simple, plain, functional. And one of the cool features on these knives is they had poured lead rivets. So basically what I could read, it did a couple things. One, it moved the weight back, which we talk about tapered tangs. They look beautiful. I think they are not really what you want most of the time in a medium to larger size knife. And the other cool thing was with these, say your wood scale shrunk, you could hammer the lead rivets. They were soft enough that you could peen your handle tight again, which was kind of cool.
Oh, that is wild.
What's crazy, what's absolutely crazy to me is, so here we have this guy, he fired it up in 1939 to support the war effort. He's handicapped. They wouldn't accept him. And by the end of the war, he had over 40 employees working for him. They were all handicapped. They were working 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in a 7-day week, they were averaging 1,000 combat knives for our troops a week.
Wow.
Wow.
Hell yeah, America.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's like you hear about, how GM went to war and all these other companies, International Harvester, and everyone was making 1911s and, Springfields and all this stuff. But our like unsung heroes are like these little guys like John Eck, who fired up and literally made thousands and thousands of knives. And it's kind of cool. In the books, they say that some sources estimate he made between 100,000 and 500,000 knives. The author of the story I was reading said it's probably only really about 30,000 to 100,000, which is still a phenomenal amount of knives. So pretty cool story. Pretty cool knife. I've got one of the blackjack ones here in my hand. I've actually got an Eck, one of the ones that was made in the 80s. But Blackjack ended up with the Eck name and was making some. And then currently K-Bar has the rights to the Eck name, and they're making some pretty cool knives right now. So Eck Model 1.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a really, really cool, interesting piece, Tom. Super historical tie, right? I mean, like you said, straight to the war.
Yeah. And like I said, the World War II was a genesis of a lot of our industry now. The fighting knives are what kind of lit the fire from Skagel to Randall to Eck and some of these other guys. Nichols, Rick-Tig, all these makers of that era stepped up.
So this is again back to that contrast thing. It's kind of interesting, right? This is to go from Jürgen Steinau to John Eck commando knife is a huge swing. So people are going to pull this up and say, "What the hell?" Because it's almost like a fairly primitive looking knife, but at the same time, like you said, it had a very specific job, right? Its job was not to be beautiful. Its job was to shank a fool from the other side, right, and get the job done in very high volume that could get out into the hands of soldiers. So very interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool.
So how collectible? I mean, there were lots of them out there. Probably lots of them got lost or thrown away or left in the ground somewhere or something. How hard is an original one to come by?
Not real hard. As far as they're available out there, they're not cheap. And there's some really cool collections of them. Brick Ender has quite a few really neat originals. But these were not, you got to remember the time. These are carbon steel knives with maple handles, and it's been 80 years basically. So they're not in great shape, and they weren't works of art to start with. They were solidly made combat knives. Yeah. So I would very much like to have a couple of the originals in my collection, but you're looking at $600 to $1,000 for one, maybe a little more depending on condition. So right now I've got 5 or 6 of the ones that were made by Blackjack back in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Pretty neat pieces, not originals, but still pretty neat and collectible.
Yeah, time was not good to some of these pieces, right?
Right.
The originals,
Well, I mean, think about it. You could be storming Normandy in the salt water, and the last thing you want to think about is you're taking care of your combat knife while you're getting shot at or whatever.
Right.
And I mean a leather sheath that's been saturated with seawater.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly. Yep. Very interesting choice, Tom. Rick's another guy we should probably have on the show to join us at some point because, like you said, he's amassed
Oh, yeah.
a magnificent, I'm going to use the word, collection of firearms and knives and historical military memorabilia. And
World War II especially.
yeah, he'd be a really interesting one to come on and talk about a bunch of historic pieces in addition to a bunch of his own stuff. So I'll have to do that sometime. And I got to ask him about these next time I'm down there talking to him. So very cool.
Thanks.
All right, Sean, what's your second pick, man, for a knife people should know about?
My second pick is The Black Knife by Ron Miller and Charlie Oakes. And for you guys not familiar with it,
Oh, yeah.
it's the knife that I think is responsible primarily for most of the coil spring autos we enjoy right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it was the first example of a coil-fired auto that I'd seen.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, it's a really straightforward piece. Aluminum handles, 440C blade, kind of a saber grind on it, some milling in the handle. And, you know, it's a good solid knife. It was issued to the Navy SEALs, a small amount were. And really, that's one of the things when it got popular that helped it gain popularity. You know, having that Navy stock number helped a whole lot in the 90s, you know.
Oh, yeah. That was a big deal.
Oh, yeah, no shit. Just a whole lot of history behind the knife, how Ron Miller originally designed it, and then he was selling them, giving them to Charlie Oakes to sell on consignment, and then Oakes refined the design, and you have the Black Knife as we currently know it now, and just a really interesting piece.
Now, Sean, this is a very, it's a very iconic knife. I could see it in my head. And I actually, when I saw it in one of the books when I was flipping through doing research, is there any tie between the Microtech, like, don't they do like a UDT or something?
The UDT is so close to it, it's ridiculous. Yeah. And I don't know if there's any kind of tie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say the shape is iconic shape for the tactical world, right?
Yeah. But I mean, the Black Knife was definitely first. And this isn't the only place you see kind of crossover with that, because at the, let's see, in the mid to late 90s, Paragon was offering, basically a Microtech UDT, and they came out with them almost simultaneously.
Right, I remember that.
I've got one of the little Paragon. Actually, I've got a mini UDT from Microtech and a mini UDT from Paragon, both.
Nice. I always thought the UDT from Microtech was the full-size one was a cool knife.
Man, the mini I've got is very interesting. It's got a green blade, which is very nice, you know, green tea coating. And then the handle is tapered. It actually tapers from thick at the forward to thin at the back.
Really?
Yes, no shit.
That's a crazy next level of complication to put into a knife that size.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a great little knife. I'll definitely get a picture of it.
I don't know anything about the source, but I'm looking at an online source that says that he didn't patent that button lock or the button release or plunge lock or whatever. And that just kind of became it's definitely become an industry standard thing, right? I mean, ProTech, everybody else is out there using that, but that's interesting.
And another interesting note is when the Navy SEALs purchased these, on the purchase order, they listed them as a CBR suit removal tool.
Really?
Yeah, because there was a negative connotation about them getting switchblades. So they put it down as a chemical, biological, radiation suit removal tool.
Check that out.
You got to be quick.
Funny.
Is that a switchblade stigma problem? That's kind of weird that there would be a problem.
Yeah, that's what I read it as. They didn't want the negative connotation of being thugs with switchblades.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can be thugs with like AR-15 or M4s or whatever.
Yeah, they have much more thug-like equipment than that for sure.
Yeah, but that dadgum switchblade makes them evil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because if you look back in the early turn of the century, autos were a normal thing. They weren't evil. You know, I mean, Schrade made them. Everybody made them. And I'm not sure when they became these evil tools of death.
Yeah, maybe movies had an influence on that, or who knows, right?
Yeah. Cool choice, Sean.
Yeah, awesome.
Great choice. And cool history.
Yeah, it's a very interesting knife and decent little bit to read up on it because, I mean, it saw a lot of combat time. both issue and private purchase.
Right.
Nice.
All right. Well, my next one, my second one is also a kind of, again, bouncing back to the other end of the spectrum, or another part of the spectrum is probably a safer way to say it, but more of a modern knife, maybe even actually more modern than the one Sean just talked about. Some people out there I know are familiar with a knife maker named Kevin Casey. And Kevin used to be a Michigan guy, and I think he's in Wyoming now. Which is one of those things where, quick way to make a knife maker groan is to talk about moving a shop. And so Kevin actually moved his forging shop because he makes his own steel. He makes some fantastically beautiful feather Damascus and lots of other stuff, I think. But the feather is kind of what I first associated with Kevin, or what I think of when I think of Kevin Casey's work. And so I think I just sent you guys a picture of the knife. There's a Persian style stag handled fixed blade that I think was at New York a few years ago, maybe several years ago now. And a guy we've talked about before on the show named David Ricardo, master engraver, friend of mine, lives here in Michigan as well. He has done a bunch of collaborative work with Kevin Casey. And so David had engraved the guard and the pommel on this knife. So it's engraved, it's inlaid, it's got a stone in the tail end of the knife. Absolutely stunning, with some really, really fantastic sheath work as well. But Kevin's work is just fascinating to look at. I think his feather Damascus is consistent and organic looking, and incredibly fine in many cases as well. Is amazing. And this is a great example of a piece where there's a lot going on, right? Mm-hmm. Between the feather and a killer piece of stag, and then highly engraved and inlaid guard and pommel. It seems like a lot, but the piece really, really, really works. And I'm almost sure this piece was at the New York show when David was there a few years ago. Because I'm almost sure I saw this in person, because I think David walked me over and showed me the work on this thing. But what a fantastic knife. And Kevin Casey makes some really, really beautiful stuff, and definitely a guy worth looking at. If you go to his website, kevincaseycustomknives.com, there are some fantastic pieces on there. Again, many with his feather Damascus, some with other kinds of Damascus that he's made, some that are engraved from a variety of makers, including some other ones from David Ricardo. There's some Russian inlaid handle stuff that's really off the charts. Native American totem type stuff inlaid into the handle in a little bit of a what I'm going to call a Moran style, like wire inlay type stuff in some cases. Much more elaborate than that, but just beautiful. So definitely check out Kevin's work, and I'll post a picture once the episode drops of this feather Persian. I think it's just stunning.
Yeah, that feather Damascus is amazing. I love it. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, and just a gorgeous example that you shared there. I mean, even without the engraving embellishment, it's an exquisite piece. And the engraving just takes it over the top, but it's still not ostentatious or gaudy. I mean, everything just totally works.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's got a ton going on, and somehow it all fits perfectly, right? I mean, it doesn't come off as too busy. No.
Mm-hmm.
It comes off as refined.
That feather Damascus hit hard some years ago, and it's been cool to see. You know, it's a interesting one to see how it's made. It's like split W type of stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to look at the curve in what I'm going to call the spine of the feather, mm-hmm. And how the blade shape matches up with it. And I don't know if that's all done by design or intention, or the blade shape came from the way that spine moves, or if it's part of the way in some cases it looks like it has to do with the way the knife is ground. But like in this case, that spine is not like the peak of a dagger grind, right?
No.
Where it uses geometry. Like this thing is actually laid out to be the shape of the knife, or the knife was made in the shape of the feather pattern. You
forge the pattern, your blade with the pattern.
Yeah.
You does that make sense? It's almost like some of the Nordic, you create like a bird's beak.
Yep.
And forge that closed, and that becomes the tip of your knife. There's a reason you don't see a lot of stock removal guys ever using a feather pattern, because you forge the blade with Damascus, which makes it pretty unique to those guys.
Yeah. So cool piece. What I'll call a recovering Michigan guy, did a massive move to Wyoming, and neat work. Definitely go check it out.
Good call. Good call.
Okay, so we're to the last round of our picks. So Michael, you're back up. What's your third knife people should know about?
This is a different one for me. I really struggled with who to pick with this one, but I wanted to go with someone newer. And I really don't know how new this guy is, but I actually have gotten to handle a couple of them, and they were mind-blowing in person. And I don't know how to pronounce it. Javier Voigt or Javier Vogt, maybe. Argentina maker, VOGT. And just absolutely beautiful automatics. He does a guard lock auto where it's almost got like a shell guard. It looks like a buoy, it looks like a fixed blade with all the fancy stuff. And then you pull back on the top guard, and that's your release for the automatic. And they are absolutely stunning in person.
The photo of it is pretty amazing.
Yeah, they look very sub-hilty. They look traditional looking.
Right.
But to hold one in person or see one, it was one of those that just blew me away. And I was like, who is this guy? And it took me forever to find this name, of who it was. But a modern maker, making these types of knives now. But I don't know how long he's been making, nothing really on his website. So I don't know a ton about him. And I could have swore one of you guys was with me when we handled one of these at one point, but maybe not. Maybe I was just wandering around.
It wasn't me. I remember.
Yeah, I've not seen it before.
Oh, it's one of those where when it hits, that auto hits hard, releases smooth. Such a kind of funky release version to it. It hits me in all types. Beautiful Damascus, beautiful finish work.
Yeah, that one you sent is pretty stunning.
Man, I'm looking at his Scorpion automatic, and yeah, it does a lot for me.
Oh yeah, The dagger.
Yes.
Well, it's just such a cool mix of like old school pattern, cool materials, and it's all Damascus, all natural, but it's like subtle, nothing too busy. He uses, shading really well. And it's like, then you throw in the mechanism and it's like, wow.
Yeah. And he's done, it looks like some pieces, it's different, more almost tactical-ish looking, art tactical couple pieces,
yeah.
Some fixed blades, and kind of messing around with some funky old school opening mechanisms, kind of like the one that, who did that first? The rotating handle around the blade.
Oh,
Barry Wood.
Barry Wood.
Yeah. Yeah. He's done one of those, and just but absolute home run on these ones.
It makes me think of like a Sheffield World Fair exhibition piece, like from the late 1800s. If you know what I mean, that's the feel I get.
Mm-hmm.
Which is something, because those knives were best of the best. A skilled cutler would take a year to build one. I mean, they were like, every detail was touched.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and he's on Instagram.
Yeah, there's some crazy pieces. He's got a Spyderco piece out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. There, like you said, it might have been when we were walking around in the afternoon at Blade Show, Michael, and saw one of his knives or something. Like on a Saturday afternoon, we go wander a little bit.
Yeah. Were you the one that handled this with me, or handled one of these with me?
Maybe so. I've heard this name before, so that might be how I heard the name. I just sent you guys a link to, he did a collab with Cast Knives, the Sobral brothers. He did a cut and shoot. That is absolutely insane.
if you get a chance, there's some videos of them shooting it in the shop.
Oh, really?
It was awesome. I watched that one getting built, and it was,
wow.
There's videos out there and all sorts of stuff. It's super cool. Like, probably one of the coolest cut and shoots I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's no joke. I mean, and it's a muzzle loading cut and shoot.
Yeah.
There's not it's not a cartridge round kind of thing. And it has like a twist Damascus like brush and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, the lever gun actually works the trigger and the hammer.
Oh, does it really?
It cocks it and sets the trigger.
Oh, man.
It's super cool.
That is cool. That's a very interesting pick, Michael. Definitely outside the box kind of thing.
Yeah, it's one of those that hit me so hard when I handled it. I was just like, this is amazing. One of those were just like, fuck, you know?
Yeah, really, really cool.
Thanks.
All right, Tom, what was your number 3 or your third pick? I say number 3 like somehow these are ranked. They definitely were not. Mine actually go maybe older to newer, but so maybe I'm doing a little bit of the thing Michael did. But Tom, what's your third one?
So yeah, you say third, but actually I went the opposite direction. Kind of. I saved what I think is maybe not the best, but the most interesting for last.
Okay.
And once again, it's a World War II era thing. It actually started a little bit before that. It started in 1938, and it's the knife is the Murphy combat knife, but it's the Dave Murphy is the knife maker, and basically started in 1938. And the reason I chose this, I think it's a pretty cool legacy type thing because. As you'll see, it's it basically what came out of this is still going today, and it's something that we've talked about quite a bit on the show, but it's not necessarily a connection you would make. So basically, 1939, Dave Murphy started making knives, and he had a blacksmith shop, and this was in I believe Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And he started using high-speed tungsten steel, and he was casting aluminum handles. And for whatever reason, I thought it was interesting. They found that old pistons made the best handles, so they used recycled pistons for the most part.
Wow!
And they were casting these aluminum handles, and they were making paring knives and carving knives and forks at the time, kitchen cutlery. And this was started in 1939, and here's the tie-in. So what would happen? He would make a batch of these knives, and they'd go out around town and try to sell them. Well, in 1940, he met someone. He met Joe Gerber, and they partnered up. So basically, Joe Gerber was a salesman. So you had Dave Murphy making the knives, and Joe Gerber selling them, and that's the start of. Basically Gerber knives, you know.
Really?
Oh wow!
Nice.
They started making. They started naming their knives, and it's cool. They named them after legendary swords. So they had Excalibur and a couple other models, and eventually it became Gerber Legendary Blades. But the war came around, and then in 1942 they needed these knives, and they took an existing knife handle they had, and basically while they were waiting, actually this was in 1941, I think, while they were waiting for the other handle to get made, he basically ground in their Murphy combat knife, and they made a couple hundred of the small junior combat knives while they were waiting for the handle dies. And then once they got the handle dies, they went to work. And that's what's crazy. Once again, the scale, right? To me, and maybe this is just where I'm thinking right now. You know, I'm trying to figure out how to make a few more knives, and these guys basically just blew it out of the water. It's estimated that they made 99,000 knives during World War II.
Yeah.
Of this, and that's just the Murphy combat knife. They made 99,000 of these, and it's like. You start thinking about the scale, and it's just like, holy crap. And I see pictures of their shop, and it's like, it's a joke. I mean, kind of, but it's kind of cool at the same time. So basically they spooled up and made these combat knives. They were tungsten tool steel and aluminum handles. And it's crazy. Some of the stories that are in the books, like, one guy jumped in a foxhole and basically went to hand-to-hand combat with a guy. His pistol, the enemy pistol mouth misfired, and he disemboweled him with a Murphy combat knife. And another guy said he swiped a dude's head off with one blow, and just some crazy stuff, right? But so in 1954, Dave Murphy Sr., sorry, the train's going by. I try to mute that normally. So there's two Dave Murphys. There was Dave Murphy Sr. and then Dave Z. Murphy. So father, son.
Okay.
They made knives from 1938 to 1954. And what's crazy, during that time period, it's estimated they made 500,000 handmade knives.
Wow.
Damn. 500,000. And I guess in 1954, Dave Murphy Sr., he was not a very good businessman, I guess, or not a very good salesman. And he got tired of it, so he just shut it down.
Wow.
And that is the birth of Gerber Legendary Blades, because Joe Gerber went ahead and kept going. And that's where we get the aluminum handles on the Mark I, the Mark II, the Gerber Guardian, the Commando.
Yeah.
All those knives.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool.
Makes a ton of sense.
Cool history thing. And pretty interesting when you start thinking the scale. We think we're making a lot of knives now, and you look back and it's like, maybe not.
Oh, I never thought that, but
nope.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I don't think I've ever delved that deep into their history.
not me either. That's a bit of new knowledge for me and appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dave Murphy knives are available out there still. I mean, the aluminum handle, there's kitchen knives and all that stuff out there.
Awesome.
It's cool because if you remember in New York, I bought a Richtig.
Mm-hmm.
It also had a cast aluminum handle, which is kind of cool. I mean, there's quite a few makers in that same era all using cast aluminum handles.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, this is an interesting thing where, I'm going to try to draw this contrast without sounding like a dick.
Too late.
It's an interesting thing where, okay, you guys, I think all three of you guys are knife makers who make knives because you love knives and you love to make knives, right? You're not knife makers because it happened to be the trade that you fell into, or because there was a war effort that needed it, or because you were the cutler in your town and because your dad was, or whatever, right? And I think something like this, I guess I don't know anything about Dave Murphy Sr. and what his real affinity for knives was, but it almost makes it sound like, or at least the description Tom made it sound like maybe this was more of a, some of these guys, I think it's more of a profession thing, right? Like, okay, I'm going to do this and it's a business and I can make a product and I can make a living and, in this case, support the war effort and whatever. And when it doesn't work, I'll just go do something else. And I think it's interesting contrast because I don't think you guys think about, I might have to go do something else. You know what I mean? Like it's not really an option, right? I mean, not that you couldn't go do something else, but it's not like in the picture necessarily, right? It's not part of like what you would go do.
No, but I think there's parallels to some of the guys doing stuff now. It's some of these machine shops and stuff like that saw that there was a need for, not need, but definitely able to sell a bunch of folders and kind of came into it as a business part of it, not as a passion for knives side of it.
Yeah. I want to be clear. I don't think there's anything wrong with either. I just think it's an interesting contrast between you guys and some of the stuff that we're talking about. Potentially, again, I'm making assumptions about Dave Murphy Sr. maybe talking out my ass, but it's interesting, right? If you were making knives and no one was buying them, you'd have to go do something else, right? But
right, and this is a hard thing. I mean, it's like, let's be totally honest. I don't think there's a knife maker in the world that hasn't thought at some point in their career, what the hell am I doing? I need to go make some money.
Right. Right.
I mean, I'll be totally honest. I've been there. I've been doing this for 27 years, but like 10 years ago, I was like, man, because I'm a nurse. I ain't going to get rich, but I can make a decent living, and it's pretty easy work at the end of the day. I mean, you work your 12 hours and you get paid. Knife making isn't like that. You may work your 60 hours and you may or may not get paid. Honestly, it depends on if anyone likes what you built, or if you can, if you sell something to someone and they have the money at that time. There's a lot of variables, and, there's knife makers I know that have actually quit, and they just hung it up and they went back to whatever they're doing because it seems glorious and glamorous, but it's not necessarily all just easy work and dollars falling from the sky.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think if all knife makers are honest, we've all probably thought of it at some time or another about, doing something else.
Yeah, the stress of it can get to you sometimes.
Oh yeah. You're by yourself, you're in the shop working, you got to be self-driven and self-motivated, because ain't nobody else care if you make a living or not. Maybe your wife, your kids.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the easiest gig, and it's also one of those where you have to be the artist, the craftsman, the marketer, the shipping tech. You've got to clean the shop. There's only one of you,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and with all that means you have to be intrinsically motivated, right? You have to do it because you want to.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe it's a weird point to bring up. It just made me think about it when you mentioned okay, he's making 99,000 of these things. And then, when the business case doesn't make any sense anymore, he just goes and does something else.
Right.
It's a different kind of work for sure. It's a different kind of knife. It's a different kind of product in a very, very different era, right? You guys aren't knocking out knives in volume for production for the U.S. military, right? I mean, you might do specialty pieces, but not like what we're talking about. So I don't know. It's just interesting. Sign of the times kind of stuff, I guess. Yeah, right.
Not
right.
yet. I'm working on it.
Right. Crying Knives is hoping his shop will be spared in World War III because it's a volume production facility.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, very cool one, Tom. That's a neat, timeline thing to bring in. I like that.
Yeah. Kind of a cool backstory to one of our favorite daggers, I think, the Gerber Mark II.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sean, this is your third pick. What you got for number 3?
All right, I was a little conflicted on what to use for this one. I'm going to go. I don't have a lot of information on the fella, and this is me asking our listeners to kind of help me if they have any information. There was a maker, late 90s from Canada, named Uwe Hoffmann, and that's spelled U-W-E and then Hoffmann. I saw him wrote up in Tactical Knives. His knives always stuck with me. Everything I saw was fixed blade. I don't know if he did folders. Large combat knives. The one that really stuck with me, he did a version of the Smatchet that is the most exemplary version of the Smatchet I've ever seen. I would love to find more information on the guy, and it just isn't out there.
What year was that?
Dude, if I had to guess, I would say somewhere between 98 and 2000. But his work, it was, from the pictures I saw, extraordinarily clean, very well thought out designs. I believe he primarily worked in D2 with a CalGuard finish, a lot of G10 and black handle materials, and just no nonsense, no bullshit, good looking combat knives.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing some pics. It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know who that one is, but it doesn't mean that. And now that gives us something intriguing to hunt for.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to continue the hunt. I actually reached out to Shane Sibbert about it because Shane, he likes that style of knife. And if anybody would remember that guy, I'm thinking it would be Shane because he likes, the large combat knives. And
Right.
I'm waiting on him to get back to me. So if I get any follow-up, I'll definitely let everybody know. And if anybody has any information or just any pictures of this maker's work, please share it with everyone because it's worth sharing.
Yeah.
I'm thumbing through a 99 issue of Knives Annual to see if there's anything there.
Huh. So it's interesting. There's some old Blade Forum sales ads that I am, right?
Yeah, but with no pictures, the goddamn photo bucket's down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Well, Dan Unger's in that sale thread, so maybe he knows. I see that. So.
Yeah, very interesting. Uwe Hoffmann. Huh.
And I wish I had more information because the knives looked simply fantastic.
Well, hopefully some of our listeners can help us out.
There you go.
Somebody will.
Fingers crossed.
This might be the beginning of a new trend, the Mark of the Maker scavenger hunt episode or something. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be fun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm chinsing out on it a little bit, but his work looked phenomenal. I'd like to know more about it, and I think we would all be enriched by seeing more of it.
Yeah.
Well, now I like that you picked that because it's not an easy Google search. It means I get to go into my books after this and look.
Oh, no, Google's almost worthless. I mean, you'll find a few kind of vague posts on Blade forums that go nowhere, and that's about it.
Which, although when we started this, was part of the reason we started it, because there's not a lot of Google stuff on a lot of the stuff that the history stuff, you know? I mean, I think that's a perfect pick, and hopefully we can find out some more information.
Man, that brings up a point that gets me a lot, where I'm like searching something, researching, and come across an old forum one, and the link's down, or Photo Bucket, and you're just like,
yeah,
you son of a...
No, yeah. Somewhere this stuff needs to be archived, and ideally for me, it would be in a book. I would love to have... It seems like no one's writing any of the good coffee table style books on the industry right now.
Well, is there a market for it? That's the question.
Yeah, that goes back to that thing, right? Is it is there a business case for it, or is it a straight up labor of love? And it's probably the latter.
Yeah, just because a few nerds like it. Don't mean.
Yeah, friggin' nerds.
Knife nerds.
It's all good. Mark, what'd you choose for your last one?
All right, last pick for me is a guy that some of you guys know. He's a modern maker. Really, really cool dude. His name is Philip Booth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know Phil.
And,
nice call. Another Michigan boy.
Another Michigan boy. Almost a little trend going on in there. I had a bunch of, like you guys, I probably had 7 or 8 different potential things I was going to pick. I have some other names that might turn into some interesting history minisode stuff, like the one that I sort of started with. Like I was going to talk about Jim Ferguson and some other guys, but I think Phil's a really cool one, and it's nice because he's making stuff right now, right? Like he's a active current maker, and
he was at Kentucky.
Yep, he's at the Kentucky show. He's done the New York show before. Phil's a Michigan guy up in Ithaca, Michigan, so not terribly far from here. Amy and I have been to his house before for a little get together. He and his wife, really sweet people. They frequent show table holders. He does lots of little automatic knives, and
super cool.
When I say little, I mean really little. Some of them.
Yeah.
He does this little knife called the Minnow. That is, it seems like I've seen it in a button release and in a scale release. The scale release ones are super, super cool because it's such a tiny little guy, and you got to hold one in your hand to appreciate how little these things are. They're very, very small, almost like miniature kind of things. And he picks really nice materials. He works with some Michigan people for Damascus and other stuff in many cases. And they're just fun little knives. And Phil's a really fun guy to talk with. Interesting character and personality. Very enjoyable dude to chat with. And one of the things that actually, the first time I met Phil was at the New York show. And what got my attention is I was wandering around, and on his table, a lot of times I think it's a traditional technique with knife makers, or like more of an old school technique of having sort of like a knife that's not really for sale, but that's sort of like get your attention, right? Like, hey, stop at my table and look at this kind of a thing, whether it's a knife or, some piece of memorabilia or a photo or something cool. And Phil had done a series of these hot rod knives where they're shaped like a tea bucket hot rod or whatever. And some feature on the hot rod is the release for the automatic. And he had a couple of those on his table at the New York show, and I was kind of just wandering the show one afternoon, And I'm like, whoa, check that out. You know, car nerd guy, love old hot rod stuff. And that really grabbed my attention, and it did its job, right? I stopped and talked to Phil, met him, chatted. Turned out he was from Michigan, so we had a very nice conversation, and you know, kind of went from there. But definitely check out Philip Booth, Philip Booth, Booth, out of Ithaca, Michigan. Check out his work. He's done a bunch of neat things, and he's kind of gotten a little more visibility in the kind of tactical knife side like that we tend to enjoy and participate in. And so that's pretty cool to see. He's got some real cool stories about his early times in knife making. He hasn't been making super, super long, but he's got some interesting stories about taking knives to shows and nobody buying them, and a purveyor coming by and giving him a hard time. Of course, no one's buying them. You're using brass and wood. No one uses brass and wood. No one wants that shit. No one will buy it.
Ooh, I know who that was.
Yeah.
So he has got a good story about that, but
let's not talk about it.
Yeah. So Phil was actually on another podcast. He was on the Bladeology podcast and did an interview with them. Real nice interview. So you can check that out for some more history about Phil. He goes into some nice background on how he got started and who he worked with and who his mentors were, who inspired him. But Phil Booth, real cool stuff, and a really, really nice dude.
Yeah. Good choice.
Man, is Phil a tailor also?
I don't know.
Because I could have swore he ran an ad that said something about him doing custom shirts also, like button-up shirts.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe I fucked up, but I kind of seem to recall that. It's definitely stuck in my head.
Certainly could be the case.
Like in a Blade magazine?
Yeah, it was knives and shirts.
I wonder if his wife was doing it. That's a potential too.
I don't know, but I'd be down for that just for the heck of it. That'd be cool.
His, like I said, he's an interesting dude, great sense of humor. I got to hang out at his shop a little bit one day when we visited them, and he's got a cool shop in his basement. He has a lot of very similar interests to me, so it's pretty cool, right? Like old pinball machines and hot rod stuff and hot rod memorabilia and things like that. And
cool.
He he rebuilt. If you're on his Facebook, maybe he's posted in his Facebook group for his knives. I don't know, but on his personal Facebook page, he has a little speedboat, it looks like a small racing boat. And when you see the pictures, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty small. But then you see a picture of him in it, and if you know Phil, you know he's not a large guy. He's a compact human, and he's in this tiny, tiny boat with like a small outboard engine on the back. And he did a resto on this and painted all kinds of stuff. It's a super fun project, and kind of like this miniature racing boat that runs, and I don't know, it's really, really cool. He put a straight pipe on this motor and all kinds of stuff. It's pretty neat. I'll send you guys a picture of it to check out, but
that's awesome.
Like a fun neighbor.
Yeah, he would be a fun neighbor. He'd be your crazy uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. So yeah, definitely check out Phil. And you can actually get stuff from him, right? It isn't like go find something in the Smithsonian kind of thing. He's out there and doing work. So nice guy.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool finish. With feels like we went from way back in time to crazy modern to current makers. It's what a cool episode.
Yeah.
Like someone said earlier, we could do this 5 or 6 more times, because I was just like, I've got a list, and I had a hard time picking who to go with.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, same here. And ironically, nobody picked the other ones that I had on my list either. So it's like pretty fun. And once again, we didn't know if we could make this last the normal 2 hours, and I think we probably went over.
I was skeptical, I'll admit.
I picked out one that I didn't choose because I thought maybe Mark was going to pick it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Next time.
Do you want me to wait till next time?
It. Yeah, we're going to do this again. It was too much fun.
3 more knives you should know about?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I can do that.
I will totally lose this piece of paper and forget who it was. But
so
that's what Evernote is for, Michael.
Yeah.
I've actually got a file cabinet I've got a file, and I just drop all my notes in there after every episode.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea. Awesome. Well, nice work, fellas. Fun. Yeah, cool. It's like a long way around the barn and covered a whole bunch of territory. So hopefully it's something folks will enjoy and maybe hear a new name or something cool that they hadn't seen before along the way that they can go check out. I know some of our newer listeners will probably hear a whole bunch of things that were turning the light bulb on. I know lots of people know Phil, but I think it's good example of a fun modern knife maker guy. And it's interesting contrast, like we talked about, alongside, some of the early work that's part of the conversation today. So pretty cool.
Well, there had to have been something for everyone on this episode.
I think you're right.
One hopes.
Awesome.
All right. Well, by the time this one comes out, we'll be really close to TKI coming up fast. You guys working on any TKI stuff yet?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've started a little, not really. I'm in the thought process stage right now.
Yeah.
Been staring at the computer for a solid week now.
Right?
different
I got 4
layers.
pieces parted up.
Nice. I just want to recognize the fact that out of you three, Sean is the most ahead so far.
Oh yeah.
Give it time.
Well, I'll be honest, 4 knives from Sean while he's going to school and everything, that's
big.
That's a pretty significant group of knives for Sean.
Yeah, good for you,
I'm
man.
not going to grind one of them. Hopefully I'm going to finish up one today and send it to Horton. He'll grind it.
Oh, yeah.
That's our
cool
collab piece for the show.
I saw the handle on that. Looked real cool.
Thank you, man. That's the first time I've done my own laminate like that, but I intend to do quite a bit more of it. It went a lot smoother than I thought it would, and the end result I'm very happy with.
Awesome.
And the blade shape's cool on it, too.
Yeah, I think so. I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but it's a little bit all right.
Yeah, it's pretty badass, and I think it's going to lend really well to what Jeremy does when Jeremy does his thing.
And that's why I went with it.
Yeah.
I had done the one that kind of had that sort of Barlow-y blade, but it had a straight clip on it. And I was like, I'd like to do kind of something like this. And since it's Jeremy, I can put a pretty deep Bowie swedge on that, and he'll be super cool with that. So
oh, yeah.
It all worked out.
That's right up his alley.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Very cool. What else you guys planning for shows this year? What, we're still in the early part of the year. I've been looking at my vacation calendar because I got to start planning out some dates, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I know I'm going to TKI, probably Blade. I might go back to the Gathering this year. That'd be cool. See what's going on there. New York show's always fun. What are you guys planning?
I just got Blade, and then I don't know. I really don't know. The end of the year is kind of up in the air for me. Kind of depends on what the kids want to do and
right
vacation and all that fun stuff.
I'm going to do a show this month, the 25th. I think we're tentatively planning on doing a get together in LA.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Pop-up thing.
Yep. We're going to do a pop-up, and then TKI in February. And then we're going to do a pop-up in Connecticut end of March, 1st of April. And then Blade Show and Blade Show, and then the Gathering. And then New York and Kentucky so far is what's planned.
Wow.
I'd like to do Blade West. I just don't know if I can fit it in there.
It's a busy year, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought I remember recently having a conversation where you were thinking about doing less shows.
I think what I want to do is be less hectic for shows and start trying to plan them out a little better. And so if I could not procrastinate until the, 2 weeks before to get ready for a show, I think they could be pretty enjoyable.
Good luck.
I know, right? It's like,
I think you just uttered every knife maker's wish.
Well, and I think honestly, that's when we're the most productive. I mean, I get more when I'm prepping for a show. Not only do I get the stuff done for the show, I get all the other stuff done too. So we'll see. I'm not going to kill myself to do Blade West. I would like to do it, but we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fellas, thanks for sharing some cool stuff with us. And I think it was a hopefully fun one. People will be Googling away. There'll be keyboards rattling away in the background during this episode. I know lots of people listen at work, so yeah, exactly. We apologize to all employers of Mark of the Maker listeners for people that are going to be Googling shit at work.
Yeah, fuck them.
Not the listeners, Sean.
No, not the listeners. They're employers.
The man.
I want you to waste as much of your employer's time as you can.
Oh, here we go.
No. I'm an employer now. So
Hey, you're the one who made that decision. I'm not responsible.
We're so sorry for your choices, Tom. All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks as always to our friends on Patreon who support the show, and all of our folks that hang out with us in the Facebook group and on Instagram. Sean gave everybody a homework assignment, so go find what was the maker's name again? Sean Uwe
Hoffman.
Yeah,
Uwehoffmann.
Uwe Hoffman. There you go. So please, if you got it, you know that somebody that listens to the show has an Uwe Hoffman. And I would actually not be surprised to find out that there's a collector of his work that listens to the show. So who knows?
And
but
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what happened to him and, just more about his knives.
Yeah. So Uwe Hoffman, collector man, we're talking to you. Get out the camera.
It's your time to shine, man. You've been waiting for this your whole fucking life.
Get out the camera, take the photos, write it up, and share it with us. We'd love to see it.
Maybe Hoffman listens to the podcast.
Oh, now you're talking. You never know. You never
tell.
know. Yeah. And if Jürgen Steinau listens, we apologize for mispronouncing your name, because I'm sure none of us are saying it right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Krein on the web at KreinKnives.net, in his Facebook group, Krein Knives, or in his Instagram account, @KreinKnives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram @BirchTreeBlades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram @msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram @markofthemaker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.